Hello, welcome to the Overcomer Podcast. I'm Cody Langford, and I'm with Miss Lynn Sollie. So this is a podcast that I've wanted to do for a very long time, talking with you, like I've already shared with you. So I'm very excited about it. You were the very first episode of an interview, and I could not think of anybody better to interview. So thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
So we're going to first start off with a few icebreaker questions, just to get the ball rolling. What is your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue. I'm also blue. What is your favorite food?
Broccoli and chicken.
Ooh.
Healthy stuff.
Healthy stuff. That is very healthy stuff. I hope mine could be like that. Okay, and what about, do you have a favorite memory? That's a hard one.
Actually, one that just comes to my mind because I was just sharing with my kids yesterday because it felt like fall yesterday, and fall's my favorite season of the year. So it's amazing how the Lord worked for you to then ask me this question, because just yesterday I was sharing with the kids one of my favorite memories with my husband for the fall was we had just started the adoption process for our first one, Margaret, from Bolivia. And then that was, I think, maybe around like April or May of that year. And for that fall, we went on like a camping trip and to Lake Gunnersville in Alabama.
Ooh.
And it was beautiful. And we rented this like old cabin that like squeaked every time you walked on the floors or went up the stairs. But it was just so beautiful. And we took his dad's little boat and we got stuck in the lily pads. And Darren's like, oh, my dad's going to be so mad. We ruined his boat. We got out of the lily pads and we got the boat out of the water and laughed about it. And he said, I'm not even going to tell my dad. I was like, okay. And so then we went, a town over had some outlets, and he wasn't a shopper. And I'm not really a shopper as far as that. Like, I'm not. But we were wanting to get some baby clothes for our first baby. And so we knew she was probably going to be around 6 months when we got her. And so we went to the outlets and to the Carter's outlet, and we got a bunch of baby clothes for Margaret. And so I'll always remember that was just so much fun shopping for our first baby that, you know, we knew was going to be placed with us at some point as far as, so it was just so special. And then when we got back to the cabin, he said, do you want to make some gumbo? And I'm from Massachusetts. He's from the South. I'm like, gumbo, never had it. Like, it's not something. He's like, you never had gumbo? And I'm like, no. Nope. If you give me like New England clam chowder, I'm good with that, but I've never had gumbo. And so then we went to the store and we got stuff, and he made gumbo on some of the old pots and pans that were in the cabin, and we had gumbo, and it was just such a fun, special memory that I have of the fall, and then of just time with him, and then anticipation of our first child. So it was a great memory. And I was just sharing that with my kids yesterday. So the Lord prepared that ahead of time, even though I didn't know I was going to be sharing it with you, because I was sharing it with my kids yesterday.
So a follow-up question, was the gumbo good?
It was great.
That's awesome.
Yep. It was great.
And that was your first time having it?
First time having it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yep. Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
That's an awesome memory.
Yep. It was great.
Well, my next question would be, where did you grow up? You just said Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Yep. Town called Ludlow. Exit 7 off the Mass Pike.
Oh, man.
Yep. So I grew up there, and I have a twin sister, identical twin sister, and then another sister that's 2 years younger than me.
Gotcha.
So,
Awesome. Your family growing up, parents, grandparents, did you have those people around you?
Yep. We actually, when I was, I think 5, we moved in with my mom's mom, my grandma Peggy. We moved into her house, and that's where I remember pretty much all of my childhood was living there. Oh, wow. And my dad was a local pharmacist, and he owned his own drugstore. So many of my years I remember being at the drugstore, and that was pretty much like where we kind of went during the day, and yeah, I have a lot of memories there.
Oh,
My
wow.
mom did like the billing, and so it really was a family
Yeah.
store as far as that. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I bet you
Mhm.
learned a lot from that.
I did.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's awesome.
Yep. Yep. My dad, and that's why I always wanted to be a nurse. And I learned how basically to like in the job that God called me to do to like care for people and treat people from my dad as a pharmacist because the business was open 9 to 9, but there were many times that I remember somebody knocking on that door and we had just locked the doors
Yeah.
and my dad would say, open up the door, you never know what they might need.
That's
And so
awesome.
he'd open up the door every single time. They'd be like, Paul, I'm out of my blood pressure medication, or I'm out of my wife's, seizure medication, things
Yeah.
like that. Come on. And my dad would always fill the prescriptions. And he taught me that. So now I've taken that to where I can honestly say, being with Nemours for almost 25 years, I never refuse late patients. I always, because I remember from my dad, you never know what they're going through. You never know what they had to go through to get here.
Yeah.
And so I've instilled that in me. And so, yeah,
Oh my goodness.
I love that.
So before getting the job at Nemours, what did you do before then?
Worked at my dad's store
Oh yeah,
growing up
it's
from
the
as soon
best
as I
family
can
business.
remember working at the store. And then I always knew I wanted to be a nurse. And so I worked during nursing school. I went to American International College for my bachelor's in nursing in Springfield, Massachusetts, which was only like 10 minutes from my house. So I worked at my dad's store, and then I worked at the Jewish nursing home, actually on weekends,
Oh wow.
as a nursing assistant. And then I worked at another nursing home, like just as like a fill-in that was close by, as a nursing assistant as well. And then my junior and senior year in college, I worked at Bay State Medical Center in there as like a student nurse assistant program. So I was a little more than a nursing assistant. I could do a little more
Yeah.
things as far as that. And then, yeah, that's
Oh, and do you love all of it?
I did.
That's
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Yep.
So you always wanted to be a nurse.
Always. Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
incredible.
Yep. And I wanted to do pediatric oncology when I was doing my student nurse assistant program at Bay State. It was a general pediatrics floor, and I really took a love for oncology patients, pediatric oncology. And so I thought that I wanted to do that as a nurse practitioner. But then once I saw the primary care route, and then I knew I was going to be having kids and more of a schedule as far as like an outpatient, that's when I decided to be primary care as far as nurse practitioner. But I did work at the Children's Hospital of Alabama as a pediatric oncology nurse for 7.5 years before I went to UAB and got my nurse practitioner for primary care.
Your parents must have been so proud.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I bet they were over the moon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh
And
my
that's where I
goodness.
met my husband.
Yeah.
Was on the cancer floor at Children's Hospital of Alabama, where I worked as a nurse. And I remember his nephew was 5 months old and was diagnosed with rhabdoid tumor, which is like really rare, and there's only a few kids with it, and they didn't live, and so they gave him the option just take him home and let him die, and or do chemo. And Darren's brother and his wife were like, we're going to pray about it and see what the Lord tells us. And they came back a few days later and said, we want to do chemo and then surgery. And so they did. And so praise the Lord, he's now a cardiothoracic surgery resident.
Oh my goodness.
In South Carolina. But and so he was in the hospital all the time. Obviously, that wasn't an easy road for a baby as far as with chemo. If he wasn't in for chemo, then he was in for fever and low white blood cell counts. And so I became friends with his mom, and she was like, I should fix you up with my brother-in-law. And I'm like, no, like I'm fine. I work 7 on, 7 off schedule. So every other week, I would do, I was off. And what I would do is babysit the kids at the hospital while their parents worked, because a lot of them had to be in for treatment for weeks at a time, or they were sick for weeks at a time. And they were like my kids. I love them. And so I would just, on my days off, I would just go up there and babysit them for their parents. And so I was like, no, I'm good. And so then one day I had Zachary as a patient. I was working 3 to 11. And it was really busy that day. So after I finished my shift, I was charting in the charting room. And the nurse that had Zachary after me, Darren, had come up there to visit Zachary. And kind of a little awkward. I'm like, hey, like, okay. And so then the nurse that had Zachary after was like, hey, that guy's still in there. And he wanted you to come back in before you leave. And Darren lived in Auburn, which was like 2 hours from Birmingham. Wow. And so I'm like, well, I'm not done yet. So I didn't finish until it was like 12:30 in the morning when I finished my charting. And so I went back in. He was still there.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he's like, can I take you to get something to eat? And so I'm like, sure. So we went to the Waffle House down the street.
Oh,
and that was
so funny.
Technically our first date, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
Oh, God bless him for being so bold.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad he was.
Yep.
So at that point, what was Darren doing at that point?
He had graduated from Auburn, and he was working at as a purchasing manager for a millwork company down in Auburn.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my goodness. I love the Waffle House. That's the classic Southern.
Yep.
That's where we're going to go.
Yep. And then our first official date was on New Year's Eve. And he took me to the Olive Garden, and then he said he was going to take me to a movie. And so we get in the movie, and I was like, what are we seeing? He's like, you'll see. And so it was Dumb and Dumber. That's the movie. I was like, okay. And then he was cracking up, and I mean, it was a funny movie, and he's like, I just didn't know what to see, and so I just picked something that I figured was funny. And so yeah, that was our first real date.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're always going to remember that.
Yep.
Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber.
I love that so much.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Do you remember at all the Waffle House? Do you remember any of the conversations? Anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had so many things on my keychains. I remember I had, so you have a ring and you have like a lot of different things on there. Yeah. And I had a bunch of them, and he said, why do you have so many things on your keychain? You need to just make it simple. He said, let me help you. And he took a bunch of the stuff off of it, and he said, now put them somewhere. He said, but that way it's not so weighted down when you put your key into the ignition. I thought, okay. So, yeah. Yep. So I remember that specifically in our conversation.
I love that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, my goodness. I love that he did that.
Yep.
The first date.
First
pretty much.
date.
And the next one, Olive Garden. Very classy place.
Yep.
I love it. You can't go wrong with an Olive Garden.
Yep. And Dumb and Dumber.
And Dumb and Dumber. What a date. Oh, my goodness. So what year was that?
That would have been 1994.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then we had a long distance pretty much relationship where, because I work 7 on 7 off, I could go down there and see him on some of my off days. And then he would come up sometimes on the weekend to see me. And so it was long distance like that. And then November 29th of 1995, we got engaged. And he said he was looking for a son. I had come to see him. We were supposed to go to a pizza restaurant, Mr. Gaddy's, for lunch with his brother and his brother's wife and their kids. And he said he was looking for a sign from the Lord that he had a ring, that it was okay, like the time to give me the ring. And so I wore makeup. I don't anymore, but I did back then. And so I had gotten there, and I said, man, I totally forgot to put makeup on today. And he said, yes, that was the sign for the Lord, because he knew that I was going to cry. And so he was like, that was the sign from the Lord that he was supposed to give me the ring that day, because I didn't have makeup on, so I wouldn't ruin my makeup.
Oh my.
And so, so then I was sitting on his couch right before we were getting ready to go to lunch. And he said, I need to ask you something. And I said, okay. He's like, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And he said, no, I really love you. I said, I really love you too. I had no clue. And then he said, I want to ask you to be my wife, to be with me forever. And
Oh,
so, yep. So I said, okay. And so,
goodness.
yep. Yep.
That is
And then
awesome.
we went to Mr. Gaddy's for pizza and and told his brother and his wife.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah.
When he asked, did you cry?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, did he cry?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yep.
Oh, I love that so much. So he said, so you just said he was looking for a sign from the Lord. So was he a Christian his whole life?
Yes.
His family?
Oh, yes.
Everything
Yeah.
like
He
that?
grew up at First Baptist Church, Trustful. Same one that he went on all the mission trips with, as
Oh,
far
wow.
as, yep. Yep.
That's
I think he got
awesome.
saved when he was 6 years old. And I grew up Catholic, very Catholic.
Gotcha.
Like,
Really?
not just, I mean, up north, most people will say they're Catholic, but it's just because, like, their grandma was Catholic.
Yeah.
And, but for my family, I mean, no, being Catholic, like, you were 100% Catholic.
Really?
We went to Christ the King Catholic Church, and I was a lector as far as, like, a reader in the church every single Saturday at 5 o'clock Mass. And I was in the Children of Mary. I went to CCD classes all my entire life that I can remember. Made my confirmation, like, very much so, to the point that when my parents knew that I was dating Darren and he was Baptist and I'm Catholic,
Yeah.
they actually didn't talk to me for, like, probably 2.5 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
As far as that. But the Lord had already been, like, working on my heart as far as towards, like, I always knew who Jesus was because obviously I was raised in church.
Yeah.
As far as so, and I remember seeing my dad on his knees many times praying. I remember my grandmother with her rosary beads all the time. As far as, like, so, like, I always knew everything about the Lord and all of that. But it was when I went to Alabama and being a nurse there, for one thing, when you go down there, I heard from everybody, patients, families, other nurses, it was, are you for Auburn or Alabama? And what church do you go to? Those were the questions that I got asked
In
by
that order.
almost every single day. And I remember going with kids that were dying. I remember the whole church, like, not the whole church, but several members of the church. Sometimes there might have been 10, 15 members of the church in a room, and they would all be praying with the family. And then people would be bringing food all of the time. And that was so different for me to see because up north, being Catholic, it was more of you went to church and you went to Mass and then you went home. And I didn't see all of that other stuff as far as that was really, like, as a believer and, like, what you did and as a church family. And so that started to open up my eyes towards the relationship that Christ wanted me to have. And, like, and even, like, for a church too, as far as, because I was still just going to the Catholic church every single week there. And then there was Lady Pat, who she still calls herself my Alabama mom, and she gave me my first Bible down there. And she'd take me to church with her. We worked the same 3 to 11 shift, and she'd take me to church a lot with her. And so God was preparing me, I feel like, that was a couple of years before I met Darren, even in advance, so that then when I met him, I was okay with the fact that he wasn't Catholic. So, like, God had prepared in advance for that. But then when we got married, we were still going to the Catholic church on Saturday night, and it was amazing. They shared the same parking lot, as far as you had the Church God, First Baptist Trustful Catholic Church. And so we would park in one parking lot, and sometimes even if we didn't go on Saturday night, we would go on Sunday mornings to the Catholic Church as far as early service, and then we would go to First Baptist for the later service and Sunday school. And so, yeah, it was just, we did that really until we got Margaret. And then I remember the Catholic priest even was sharing as far as he was like, when you have kids, you want to go to where you're going to worship together. And he had said that's more important, is that you're serving Christ, not a certain denomination.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's rare to
Yes.
hear a Catholic church say that, but he did.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, yep.
Oh, praise
And
the
so,
Lord.
so then I was like, all right, well then we're going to go ahead and go to First Baptist. And that was it's actually even before we got Margaret. Now that I think of it, it was actually, I think, when we were planning our wedding. I think that's when he actually said that, because we had said we knew we wanted to have kids, and he had told us that. And then for the wedding, my parents weren't going to, my dad wasn't going to walk me down the aisle if we didn't get married in a Catholic church. And so we were doing counseling with the Baptist church, and then we were doing counseling with the Catholic church. And so then we ended up having the Baptist preacher have do some of the Catholic, in the Catholic church, the mass that we did. He spoke some, as far as, so we incorporated that in, but I still wanted my dad to walk me down the aisle. I didn't want to not have that. And so we got married in the Catholic church, but we had the Baptist preacher involved in the service as well.
Gotcha.
And
he walked you down the aisle?
My dad walked me down the aisle. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. And then, fast forwarding then my testimony. So then we had, we were trying to have kids, and we couldn't. And so then, couldn't find anything wrong as far as that. And so, then we were like, well, I wanted more than I wanted pregnancy. I wanted to be a mom. And so then we went ahead and started the adoption process for Margaret with Villa Hope International Adoptions. And the only country we fit into, because we were 25 at the time, we were married, I think 2 years at the time, was Bolivia. As far as, so we're like, well, that's where the Lord is telling us to go then. And so, and they said you'd get a child between like 5 and 6 months old will be the youngest. And so that's what we were then focusing all our paperwork and our planning and everything for. And so during that time, there was a mission trip. So we had already started the paperwork for Margaret and stuff. And we were at First Baptist Trustful. And I always wanted Catholic background, always be in the back as far as that, not really down front. So we always sat in the back. And I remember they were calling for people that wanted to go on a mission trip to El Salvador, like an evangelical, not like a medical one.
Yeah.
And so I felt so strongly that the Lord was saying we should go on this trip. And they said they had an opening for 2 more people. And so I was like, Darren, we have to go. And so he's like, what? And so I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you want to go down front and tell them right now, like, we want to go? I was like, yeah. And so we went down front, and we signed up for it. And then, of course, now I know it was just the devil later that night. We had a meeting, and we were getting ready to go to the meeting. And I was like, what did I do? Like El Salvador's like mostly Catholic as far as a lot of their, and like at that point I still consider myself Catholic too. And so I was like, they're already like Christian, like what, like, I don't know. But then I was like, nope, I remember that feeling that like came over me to go. So like, I need to do that. We need to go. Yeah. So we went. And there were several people on the trip that went with us and stuff. And we would take a bus, and we would go to the town park. And that we would like witness to people at the park all during the day. And then at night, we would go show a Jesus film, like to a community. We'd knock on the doors and invite them to like wherever it would be out in the field they could all walk to. And then we would show the Jesus movie and then pray with people after that. And we'd go to like different towns and stuff the whole time. I think we were there like 5 days or 7 days. And so it wasn't until one day, I was like witnessing to somebody, asking them, do you know if you died today, if you would go to heaven or hell? And the lady said, I'm Catholic. And we had a Spanish interpreter. She said, I'm Catholic. And so I don't know. I just hope I'm good enough and I do good enough. I don't know. And it like hit me in the face. I just so remember the lady to this day, where we were standing and everything. It hit me in the face like, I feel the same way. Like, if I died right now, I don't know either. I know all about Jesus, but I hope that I'm good enough and I continue to like try to do good enough. And I feel the same way as you do right now. And I'm witnessing for you to like, and it was like, and so I ended up, Darren was with me. And so he led the lady to the Lord, praise the Lord. And he also basically led me to the Lord because when we were praying with the lady, I was like, that's what I need. And so then we went home to the hotel that day. And in our hotel room, I was telling him, and he said, I could see it all over your face. And I said, I need that. And so then we prayed, and I asked Jesus into my heart.
Oh my
and
goodness.
with Darren. And then what was so cool is that the pastor, Gene Ennis, that baptized Darren as a little boy, was on the trip too.
Oh my goodness.
And so then we went to Gene's room and we told Gene about it. He started crying. And then he said, when we get back home, he said, I could baptize you in the swimming pool. He said, at the hotel right now, if you want. And I said, no. I said, I want to do it at the same church that Darren got baptized in and have you baptize me, just like you did Darren.
Oh my
and so,
goodness.
So the rest of that trip, there was several people that we ended up leading to the Lord at school. I remember I was. And it was amazing because some of the people that were there that on the trip with us that I didn't even really know very well, I was just going. Soon as we would get out of the bus, I would be asking people if they know Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And and he's like, she's like got a fire under her. Like, what just happened to her? And so, but it was like how Pastor Rick talks about, like, you just have a whole new set of glasses. And all of a sudden I just was like, I just had such a passion for because I felt so free, like I'm saved. Like, it just was like, just a whole, obviously.
Listening to the Lord saying, I got to take you to El Salvador.
Yes. So the Lord had so much more when he spoke to my heart that day in the back of the church. There was so much more that he had for me than just, I shouldn't say just leading other people to the Lord, because that's the 100% the most wonderful thing that I can say I've done in my life as far as, but just that he knew that he wanted to lead me to the Lord there too, and have it be so special that Gene was on the trip so that we told him. And then when we got back, Gene baptized me as far as,
goodness.
Yep.
That is so awesome.
So it was,
Isn't that crazy you talking about that right now? Just like looking back, just being like, Lord, you were with me that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just pointing me right to you. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
It's the relationship of, Lynn, I want you. I
Yeah.
want you. I don't want just the tradition. I don't want just the words.
Mhm.
I want your heart.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. That is
Yeah,
awesome.
it totally changed me. Yep. So,
Praise the Lord.
yeah. Then I felt like that was the beginning of my relationship with Jesus, even though I knew all about him, because I did know all about him. Thank God. I thank God for all that my parents instilled in me and knowing the Lord as far as who he was. And I always knew all of that. But it was that personal relationship of walking with him and trusting him and wanting to just tell others all about him that. And the Lord prepared that, because if it hadn't been for the nurse Pat in my life that was like a mom to me and gave me my first Bible, if it wasn't for me seeing the love of Christ shared by all those people in those many hospital rooms when kids were dying and kids were so sick, that prepared me for what I knew I needed to receive, but I didn't know. I just knew something was missing. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I bet Darren was over the moon.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So going, of course, so you got Margaret. So how many kids do you have now?
14.
14.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
So this will be a funny question. Which one's your favorite?
Me. All of them.
Good, good. That's
Yep.
a very good answer.
All of them. Yep.
Oh my
Each
goodness.
have unique things that I absolutely just love about them. Yeah.
So if you could just share a little bit of just your journey of getting your 14 kids.
Sure. So we had always known that we wanted, I'd always said 5 kids as far as I knew I wanted a bunch of kids. Darren, he didn't really say exactly.
Yeah.
He just was like, okay. Well, then, like I say, when we were trying and we couldn't, then we adopted Margaret from Bolivia. And when we picked her up, we had to stay a month there.
Oh wow.
And when we picked her up at the orphanage, the nurse kept saying, Sonrie, and she had tears in her eyes, and that meant smile, and that was the first time they'd ever seen her smile.
Oh my
Was
goodness.
when we
Oh.
picked her up, so I knew God
Yeah.
meant for her to be with us as far as and so then we adopted Anna Marie from Alabama through a private Christian agency there, and that was in 2000, and January of 2000. And then they had called us, the adoption agency internationally that we adopted Margaret from. They said they're closing their adoptions to the United States. Bolivia is. So if you want to adopt again, we suggest you get your dossier in soon. And so now we had just gotten Anna Marie, but we said, yeah, we can do it and so we did. And then praise the Lord, then we got the call for Andrew and Anthony. That was October. And that was an amazing story, too, how God worked that out, because we had Margaret and Anna Marie, and then we were moving from Alabama to Delaware because we knew we wanted more kids. We were looking for something that would be able to travel to both of our families as far as that.
Gotcha,
So
yeah.
Darren went through a headhunter, and that's how he found American Cedar and Millwork as far as in Lewis. And so he came up a few months earlier than I did, and I stayed back with the girls because we hadn't sold our house yet. And we were going to use the money that we sold from our house to go to Bolivia and get the boys, because it was about at that point $30,000. And so we knew we would probably make that on our house, and then we were just going to live in this little apartment in Millsboro, apartment complex, so that we could use that money to get them. And so we got the call on September, I think it was September the 13th, that we were going to travel. Would we take 2 twin boys? And we said, sure, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we'll take them. And so then they said, okay, well, you'll probably travel in 1 month. And so I was like, okay. And so then I told Darren, and he said, okay, that sounds good. And so I said, yeah, but Darren, our house hasn't sold yet. So where are we going to get the money, $30,000, to go get these 2 boys when we don't have the money yet because our house hasn't sold? He said, Lynn, God will work it all out. He said he may not be early, but he's never late. If he wants us to go get those boys, he will have us go get those boys. And so that night, we get a call. It was midnight. And I had prayed so hard that entire day long that our house would sell. We didn't have many people looking at it then. And at that point, I had already moved up here. Darren went a few months earlier, and then I went. So there was no one looking at our house as far as looking after it, as far as just somebody mowing the grass, but that's it as far as. And we hadn't had that many people look at it. And it was midnight, and the phone rang, and it was our real estate agent. And she said, you won't believe this. And Darren was like, yeah, I bet I will, because I know my God. I mean, that was just my husband.
Oh my goodness.
And she said, your house just sold. And she said 9:30 at night, somebody who was moving in from out of state that needed a place ASAP. The place that they had the person backed out of selling their house. So they called her at 9:30 at night and said, we need to look at a house emergently because it has to be vacant. We need something. And so she took them to our house and they put a contract on our house right after looking at it. And the best part is what we made on the house, $30,100.
Oh my gosh. Give you
Amazing.
an extra $100.
Amazing.
Oh my goodness.
And so then when the orphanage called us a few days later and said, well, one of their heads might be flat. We don't know if something neurologically is wrong with one of them. We just don't know. Would you still take them? Yep, we're taking them. They're ours. There's no question because God showed us 100% that those two boys are ours. And they ended up being totally fine. But yeah, it was amazing. So that was such a testimony of how God is just so faithful. And if it's his will, he will work it out. Yeah. So, and he sure did. So, and then, so I have to go down the line. Margaret, Anne Marie, Andrew, Anthony. And then Aaron was born in Alabama, and we actually met his birth mom at the hospital. We got him as a newborn. He was our first newborn to get. And we've had a good relationship with her. And he has a good relationship with her. And so that was our first kind of open adoption. And that worked out fine. And then we went back and got Karina from the private Christian agency as well. Wow. She was 3.5 months old when we got her. Margaret, Anna Marie, Andrew. So then I still had that desire as far as to be pregnant. And I was about almost 35. And I just had that desire, like I wanted to carry a baby. And in vitro was becoming a little more popular at that time. And so we went and saw a reproductive endocrinologist, and we were diagnosed with male factor infertility, which he had no explanation for, anything like that. And so they said we would be good candidates to try IVF as far as, and so we did. And the first of time we had discussed up front we would not discard any embryos because they're lives, and so God would give us whatever he wanted, and we would use all of them as far as that. And so we had 6 embryos and we froze 3, and then we implanted 3. And as soon as I had the first positive pregnancy test and they did the levels, I was already basically like losing it. And so that was like a miscarriage. And so then we went back in to use the 3 that were frozen. He said, you're still young. They can stay frozen for 10 years. Let's do another fresh cycle. And so I was a very low responder. My levels weren't rising very good. I was on the max doses of medication. And I remember going in and it was like, well, you have 2, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. And I remember going out to my car at Christiana, crying, and I just so vividly remember just feeling the presence of the Lord. And I just said, Lord, if this isn't your will for me, I'm fine with it. Like, I have this desire, but I also know that if it's not your will, I'm so blessed with all the kids that you've given to me. So if I just need to stop taking all the medication right now and just say I'm fine, then it's fine. But if you want me to keep doing it, then just let it work or give me a sign that to continue. So I got myself together. I went back in there and I was crying and I said, I just don't know if I should continue or not. And the reproductive endocrinologist said, you need to continue because it's not about quantity, it's about quality. You have 2 and they look like things are looking like it's going to be good. I said, okay, I'll do that. And I had prayed before I went in that the Lord would tell me. So I figured he can use anybody, even if the person's not a Christian, to like, so then I did. And so the two made it to the transfer, and that was Luke and Paul.
Oh my goodness.
And so then about a year later, I went back in to use the 3 that we had frozen, and the reproductive endocrinologist said, do another fresh cycle. They can stay frozen as far as, so we did. We had 3. We put 3 in, and 1 took, and that was James. And then I remember being at work one day, and one of the people that I work with was like, they're really looking for people to take drug-addicted babies for their program, because they don't really have a lot of parents wanting to take that, or to take like biracial or African American. Well, I didn't care as far as that. We'd already had African American, biracial, Hispanic in our family. I didn't care as far as, and so the next day I talked to Darren about it. The next day we called and we had a meeting, and then we were on the books to go get a baby as far as that. And so we actually got a call from several, maybe it was 5 months later. It wasn't that long, because I was still nursing James, and they said, we have a baby for you. It was a little girl, and she was biracial, and so we got the baby, and we had her for 5 days, and the kids were all in love with her and everything. I was nursing her, and then the birth mom called to take her back. And so of course the kids, were heartbroken, and, we were, but I also surrendered to whatever the Lord's will was, because I'm like, at that point, I'm a mom. I understand, like, you love your baby. And so, like, she has every right to take her back as far as, and so, we went back to the agency and met the mom, gave her back her baby, and then she said, you'll be placed at the top of the list if another mom comes in that has an emergency placement, or like whatever. And as far as, and so I'm like, okay, like, and so we went home, we prayed, and we said, the Lord will provide the perfect baby. And so this baby was in our lives for a reason, for a very short time. And we touched her life. We touched the mother's life, and showed Christ to her. And so the Lord will provide us to exactly we need to have. And so we continued to pray. One day got a call. It was maybe a couple months later. And the mom was 39 years old, and had done drugs and alcohol all through her pregnancy, had cycles that she thought were cycles. And then one day when she didn't have a cycle, she took a pregnancy test, was positive, went to the abortion clinic the next day, and they said, you're already 32 weeks along, so you can't abort. This was in Virginia Beach. Oh, wow. And so then she went to the adoption agency, and that's how we ended up. She picked us, and so that's how we got our Joshua. As far as, and so it was totally, it's another testimony of how the Lord just provides, because had we not gone through the disrupted adoption placement, we wouldn't have been put to the top of the list for the next baby that came along as an emergency placement. And so it just showed how, sometimes what might seem like a really disappointment or a trial, God works it out for good, as far as we just can't see the big picture. Yeah. And so if we trust him, he works it out for good. And I cannot imagine our life without Joshua. And Joshua looks just like, even though he was supposed to be biracial, he's not. And he looks just like the boys. As far as people used to always say, he looked more like my husband than what my redhead biological one looks like us. And so, so Joshua has been such a blessing. Could not imagine my life without him. And so, again, that's just another testimony as far as the Lord's provision. And then because he was a drug and alcohol baby, since I was nursing James, I was able to nurse him too, which helped him a whole lot as well.
Oh, my goodness.
And so that was just a blessing. And so then from Joshua. And then naturally, then we conceived after, I think about another year after we got Joshua, maybe not even that long. I felt sick one day, and I took a pregnancy test, and I was positive, and so we had naturally conceived
Oh my goodness.
Malachi. Yep. And then after Malachi, we naturally then conceived Caleb, and I was 40 when I got pregnant with Caleb.
Wow.
And so then about, I think I was 42, we were still paying every month to keep those 3 frozen and praying for those 3 frozen babies for so many years, that then I was like, all right, I need to use them. But I didn't want to take all of the hormones and like all of that kind of stuff. And so I had, I went to the back to the reproductive endocrinologist, said, hey, I want to use those 3. And so then he's like, oh, you need to do all these hormones. I'm like, no, I just want to put them in a regular natural cycle. And if they take, they take. But if they don't, then I know they're going to be in heaven with the Lord, and I'm going to see them again one day. And I have peace about that, as far as I felt very strongly that I wasn't going to take anything, as far as only just the progesterone, which I had to take as far as for the others. And so he said, all right, he said, so they'd been frozen 9.5 years, and they thawed them out. They were frozen at 3 days of life, 9.5 years before. And then they thawed the 3 out on a Monday. On Tuesday, one of them died. And then on Wednesday, the second one died. And then, so he made them live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 more days. So they really, technically, they were live 7 days, and which a lot of times they don't even survive that long, as far as usually transfer around day 5 or so, even now. But so on that Thursday, one was still there. And so we went in for the transfer. And so then he said to Darren and I, as he did not believe in the Lord, he said, if you would have done it my way, you would have kid number 13 right now. He said, but he said, you didn't. And so I said, no. I said, we did it God's way. I said, and we'll see what God can do. And so, and we did naturally, obviously, keep trying, because we're like, we'll increase our chances, even though I was in perimenopause, and they had actually accidentally checked my levels, which I know that was by God, because it grew my testimony, and my levels were high, as far as technically showing that my eggs should be like too old to be able to to conceive. And they accidentally checked that. And because I remember them saying, well, your other levels are good. This is high, but we don't really need that because you're putting a frozen embryo in. And so I'm like, yeah, I already know I'm in perimenopause, so whatever. But now that I look back, the Lord used that to show them how unlikely it was that I would be able to conceive on my own. And so, so when they put the baby in, and they have to use like a tube, and they have to put in the exact right spot. He so didn't think that it was going to work that he had one of his assistants that do the transfer, and she said, my success rate's 100%, which I says, like, I don't care, like, whatever, the Lord is in control. What I found out later on was that it was 100% because she'd never done one before.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And so then when we went back in a week later, my HCG was 69, and then it went to 1,199 a few days after that. Wow. And so they said, you need to come in right away, like you're pregnant, but like your levels are like so high. And they said it's too early for one. We only put one embryo in. It's too early for it to split, so it can't be an identical twin. They thought maybe I had a molar pregnancy or like a tumor or something like that. And so then we went in, and there were 2. And it was a natural conception, which, again, the Lord used them to falsely have checked my levels, which showed that it shouldn't even be possible to show what he can do. So there was the natural conception in there that was already there when they put the frozen baby in, but she didn't get damaged. And they were, so I had twins, but they were actually 9.5 years apart.
Oh my
And because
goodness.
Madeline was frozen 9.5 years earlier, and then Laura-Lisa was a natural conception as far as so.
Oh my God.
So when they did my ultrasound and they saw, because he kept thinking, oh no, it's not, it's just a blob. I was like, nope, that's a baby. I can tell you that's a baby. And so they were always a few days behind because obviously Laura-Lisa was a little bit older because she'd been in there. And so it was just it was a gestational sac and then a sac with a fetal pole. And then the next time there was one heartbeat and then there was a sac with a fetal pole. And then finally, after a couple times of going, there were 2 heartbeats. And so when he saw the 2 heartbeats, his exact words were, unbelievable. And I said, that's what my God can do.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my goodness. 14 kids.
14 kids.
You love them all.
And so, yes. And so the youngest are 10, and then the oldest is 26, and I have several grandkids too. And so that was one of a big hurdle, I say, if I look at things in my life that the Lord has used in my testimony. It was the first thing would have been my background coming from Catholic background.
Yeah.
And then the second would have been infertility. And then the third would be when my husband got sick, as far as because we, had 14 kids. And I remember one day he was feeling that he had, like he said, he just had trouble swallowing. And so I made an appointment with my GI doctor as far as, and they said it's probably just a lower esophageal ring. And it's common in men. We'll just go in there, do an endoscopy, stretch it out, and you'll be good. So it was during COVID times, as far as I'd just been starting with the COVID stuff and all of that. So I had to drop him off. I couldn't go in with him. And when he came out, he had a look on his face, and he said, I have a mass in my esophagus. Well, I knew that was not good. So we went and had a CT scan. And then I went back to the GI's office with the results because I knew I'm like something, this doesn't look good. And he tried to give me encouragement. Well, let's just wait until, I biopsied it until that comes back. And so then I just kind of knew in my heart, though, as far as that. And I think God was just preparing me. And then I was working on Tuesday that day, and Darren had gotten the call. He was going to go to the kids' soccer game, and he got the call and said that it was cancer. And he said he remembers vividly, like he said to himself, he's like, how am I going to go tell Lynn? Like, he looked up esophageal cancer real quick, and it wasn't a good prognosis, and he had no risk factors for it at all. He said, how am I going to tell Lynn? What am I going to do? And he heard the Lord just tell him. He never said he was going to heal him. He just told him not to worry about it. And so he said at that moment, he had a choice. He was either going to still continue to worry about it and to fret about, like, how, or he was just going to say, all right, I'm not worrying about it then. You're telling me not to worry about it. You're going to work it out, whatever the outcome. Okay. And so, like Pastor Rick says, if the Lord speaks to you, that's money in the bank. And so Darren, I can honestly say his entire illness, he did not worry about it. And so he met me up at my office, and it was dark up, and it was up in Dover. It's not that good of an area as far as, and I remember it was dark, and I didn't reckon the street light was out right there. So I didn't know who was getting out of it. And I was the last one to leave, and I didn't know who was getting out of the car and coming towards me. And all I had was my broccoli and chicken and spinach. And I had it in a bowl. I was going to eat it on my way home. And I almost threw it at him because he was coming out of the car to tell me to, like, stand down to, like, give me a hug and meet me. And I had the thing, I was almost ready to throw it at him. And he said, Lynn. And I didn't. And so that kind of was the icebreaker that the Lord used, because then we both started laughing. He's like, you were almost about to dump broccoli and spinach and chicken on me. I'm like, yes, I was, because I didn't have anything else to, like, I didn't know who you were. And so we laughed at that. And then he told me, and it actually was Malachi's birthday, our son Malachi's birthday. So we went home. And then we told the kids, and I remember Darren saying, it's going to be all right. No, God is in control. He told me not to worry about it. So I'm telling all you guys not to worry about it. It's going to be okay. The Lord has it all in his hands and is going to be okay. And so his prognosis carried about a 17% chance of survival for 1 year. Praise God, he lived a lot longer than that. I want to say about 3.5 years. And he actually had he did chemo, radiation, and then the whole esophagectomy. And he had some really good quality of time when he was quote unquote cancer free that the Lord allowed him to have memories with the kids and of us and everything. And then they saw a spot on his lung and they thought it was nothing, but they were watching it for several months. And then they biopsied it and it came back as positive for cancer. And so then they had him do a PET scan, and that's when he had lesions all in his bones too. And then he decided at that point, they were like, well, you feel great. And he's like, yeah. And he said, so I don't want to do anything because they told him it's not going to cure you. It would just be to alleviate symptoms. And if you're symptom free right now, it's not just about quantity of life, it's about quality of life too. And so he decided not to do any palliative chemo or anything like that until it was about, I want to say probably maybe about a year later when then he started doing some chemo like just by mouth. And he did have some radiation to one area that was bothering him on his ribs. And then I remember right around the beginning of August or so, he was still doing fine. He had retired from work, and so he was able to spend more time with the kids. He was still coaching soccer, going on mission trips, doing all of the same stuff. And then August, Caleb had one of his, might have even been June, I think, one of his soccer games at the DE turf. And Darren, of course, would always be on the sidelines, like, as another coach kind of thing, telling them and cheering for them and all that. And he drove. I came from work and he drove with his Jeep and he didn't get out of the car. And then Lorleys went over to him and went to go give him a hug. And he was like, ow. And I was like, what's the matter? And he was like, I don't know. I think he's just slept wrong. And I was like, he didn't get out of the car. Like, I think he's really in pain. And then Caleb wasn't doing so well that game. But Darren was still paying attention to the game because then Luke was with Darren and he said, get out there and go tell your brother he needs to do better in this spot and he needs to look out for this guy and all that. So he was still in the game. Yeah. And so then that's when he started getting worse as far as then had to really start taking pain medication. And then it kind of went downhill from there. And then, but he still, like, this time last year, we were actually on our way down to Camp Creek Baptist Church for a second mission trip. The one that they had did in June, they needed some more work. And so God worked that out too, because I had never gone on the mission trip. Obviously, it was a men on mission trip. But our son was getting engaged to his girlfriend. And so it was like the perfect time. I'm like, yeah, I'll drive. Darren wasn't well enough to drive down there by himself. And so I was like, let's just go over Labor Day, weekend, and you can go for 5 days on the trip. And then we'll be there for the engagement too. And I'm so glad I did, because I got to see why his heart was so much for Men on Mission, that he had such a passion for that ministry. And that was another time that the Lord spoke to me, and I clearly remember it. It was the very last day, and Darren had on his scuba shirt from Vacation Bible School here at Crossroad, and he was by the Men on Mission trailer, and he was so happy that they had gotten all that they wanted to do with that second trip. And I knew he felt bad, but he was smiling. And so I said, let me get your picture. And I snapped the picture, and it was like instantly the Lord spoke to me and said, that's the picture you're going to use for his obituary. Oh, wow. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't even want to think about this right now. Like, I'm enjoying the fact that, but it was like, nope, just keep it in the back of your mind. That's the picture to use for his obituary. And so I was like, okay, Lord. And so then we came back home at that, like I say, that was the first week of September. And then September, around September, I think it was the 26th, 27th, he went in for a chemo, and it did not make him feel good at all. He was vomiting. And the very next day was still vomiting. And how the Lord even worked that out was I was thinking to myself, we have 2 kids at Western Carolina, another one at North Greenville University, and how am I going to know when to bring them home to spend time with him, but then not disrupt their classes for like a false alarm kind of thing? And I was kind of, because I knew he was getting worse. And I'm like, when do I know to bring them home and when it's not? Like, Lord, help me to know how God can use a bad situation, the hurricane that hit Western Carolina, that was one of the worst that they've ever had, that washed out roads and everything like that, hit their university area. And they were told that they had to leave. Actually, one of ours even had to be rescued by a lifeboat as far as with the floodwaters and that. And so God used the hurricane, how he can work all things for good. Yeah. He used the hurricane to bring all 3 of them home at the same time that he knew they would need to be here for Darren. And they wouldn't get penalized for their school because their school was doing all online. Yeah. And so they ended up coming home. It was my grandson Marco's birthday party at our house the very next day. And Darren had said, I need to go to the hospital. And we went to Bay Health, and they admitted him there. And then from there, his pain was so bad, he couldn't stop vomiting. He had his eyes closed most of the time, which I'd seen that from seeing cancer patients, kids die and stuff like that all the time. I knew he was kind of transitioning from and so I was so glad the kids were all able to be there with him there. And then we weren't sure if we were going to do, at that point, we were going to probably do palliative care at home. And but we didn't have a referral in, like they weren't going to be able to see him for a few weeks, and they were going to try to get us on some pain medicine and then send us home and wait for them to come. And there was one night when it was just him and I, and it was like midnight, and he was hanging over, he was 6'6", so I mean, he was hanging on top of the IV pole. He had already just gotten pain medicine. The doctor was in an emergency for the floor, so he couldn't get the order for another stat dose of pain medicine. And then he was on the floor, then he was across the bed, and then he said, feel this, and I felt the huge tumor that was on his back. And he said, I can't take it anymore. He said, I can't take it anymore. He said, I can't do this anymore. He said, and so I said, Darren, I said, the only thing that I know to do if you want pain medicine that you can be pain-free is to call hospice, because then it's their whole mission is to keep you pain-free. And so then he said, call them. And so waited till the nurse finally came in and got him pain medicine. He went back to sleep, and I went out to with my cell phone out into the hallway, and I called it and hung up, called it and hung up, called it. And then the third time I told them. And so then they came the next day, and then they talked to him about whether he still wanted IV fluids, then he would have to go the palliative care route. If he didn't care about not having IV fluids and stuff like that, he could do with hospice. And I'm so glad he made that decision. He said, to prolong my life for a few more days, I know where I'm going. He said, so I don't need the IV fluids. Wow. And so he said, God will tell me how long I have to live. If he wants me to drink, I'll be able to drink. And so then he went with hospice. And so then I remember when they left the room to go work on paperwork, he said, I just made the decision to be with Jesus, and I'm okay with it.
Oh, my goodness.
And so, so it was just, and then he went to hospice. He lived actually 9 days there. And he had some good times with the kids as far as obviously me being there by his side and stuff. And he got to really talk to each one of the kids, and I have a video for every one of them to have of him talking to each one of the kids and their significant others. And then he typed the next day. He couldn't really talk. He typed on his phone and told them to be strong, take care of each other, trust Jesus, and take care of mama.
Oh.
And yep.
Oh my goodness.
And so I can honestly say they've done that. And so, and that also shows me how the Lord already knew ahead of time in giving us all the kids that he did, because I don't feel alone. Like, I have so many kids, and I'm so thankful for that as far as, and so, I'm just so thankful for the Lord. Like, my favorite scripture verse, through all of this was Romans 8:28. God, in all things, God works for the good for those who love him. Those are called according to his purpose. And so I know that I love the Lord. And so God will work out every situation that is good or bad. He will work it out for his good, because his word does not lie. So whether you're on the mountaintop or whether you're in the valley, God will work all things out for good for those who love him. And so I cling to that every single day of my life. And it also shows that if you know, it might not turn out the way you want, but if you do it like it says, according to his will, if you align your prayers according to what the will of God is, it's 100% wonderful outcome. Because even if it's not the way you plan, God will work it out for good. And so I can honestly say that I totally trust in that. And so, not to say there's not some days when I really miss him, because I miss him every single day, but I always know that God will work it out for good. There will be good to come out of every bad situation, because God's word does not lie.
Oh.
And so he will always be with us. And so for anyone who's going through, a challenging time, that would be my thing. That in all things, God will work it out for good for those who love him, those who are called according to his purpose. And so our purpose is to serve the Lord. It's to be a witness for him. It's to share your testimony, just like what I'm doing. So God will use every situation that you go through in life to grow your testimony. And so you might not see it at that moment, but he will use it to grow your testimony. Just look at even my husband. He would say that all the time. I've met people that I've been able to witness to for the Lord that if I didn't have cancer, I would have never been able to reach. And so it's so true. God works all things out for the good for those who love him.
Goodness. I don't think there's another question I could ask that could top that answer. Oh my goodness. Well, so for me and this podcast, like I said, you're the very first person. And I mean, that was way better than I could have ever thought. And I just know me personally, me and my wife, our family, we always see you and your family. You always have a smile on your face. And that's why you were seriously the first person I could think of.
Oh, thank you. And that's just the Lord, because in going through trials, you can still have joy in your heart if you have the Lord there and you know that he's going to work everything out for good. You can still smile and you can have joy even though you're going through hard circumstances, because the joy doesn't come from your circumstances. The joy comes from your peace in the Lord and knowing that he's with you always.
Oh my goodness.
And I even look at times when I miss him, I don't let myself stay there for long, because it's not even like just I don't want myself to stay there for long. The Lord doesn't let me stay there for long, because I say, death, where is your sting? There's none right now, because he has victory. He's in heaven with Jesus. And so even on the days that I miss him the most, I would never want him to come back. I wouldn't, because he's with the Lord. He's enjoying his reward for the price that Christ paid on the cross for us. And so as a life well served in serving the Lord, he's where he should be. He's where we all want to be, because we know Jesus as our Lord and Savior. And so we're here on this earth to do the will of the Lord until he calls us home, and then praise God. As far as so as much as I miss him, I'm so happy that he is there. And I can't wait to see him one day. And so, yeah.
Think about that, the blessings that the Lord has given you that you haven't even seen yet. He's there with your babies that you lost.
Amen.
So,
Yep.
I mean, he's already there with
Yep.
your kids.
Yep.
And one day, I mean, so when you get to heaven, how many kids will you have?
I never really thought about that. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and I don't know. Maybe 20.
Oh my
I
goodness.
never really thought about that question. The
Isn't
Lord
that-
knows it though.
Isn't
Even
that
though
the
I don't, He does.
craziest thing?
So yeah.
Isn't that the
Yep.
craziest thing?
Yep.
Just the blessings that he has that you haven't even seen yet.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I do not think we could top any better closing to that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for doing this, and we'll see you next time.